So this is the scripture that Mr. Medley was sharing with us. Look at this. Feeding the 5,000. Now when Jesus heard this, he heard that John the Baptist had been killed by Herod Antipas in the north. So he was watching the martyrdom of the saints, even as his ministry was just started. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. So this is people leaving the settled part of the world and going out into the wilderness. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, and compassion for them, and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away, so that they may go to the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." And he said to them, "Bring them here." Oh, a little bit of scripture missing there. They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Here ends the reading of the word. If you grew up in church, or you spent some time in church in Sunday school, this is one of those stories that you've heard over and over and over again. And rightly so. This is the miracle that occurs in all 4 Gospels. Every Gospel writer has got a slightly different take on it, uses slightly different words, but the same miracle occurs in all 4 Gospels. Well, in 2,000 years, we've kind of made this, the church has made this kind of a stained glass story. And so what a preacher would normally do with this is save this text until the fall, and then we'd have a stewardship campaign, and then I would be telling you about how little you can give. God's going to take that. You've got to prime the pump, and then you've got to sow the seed, and then God's going to grow the seed. And if I was a financial abundance preacher, this is the text I would use. You have probably had that experience yourself at some point in your journey through life. Instead of doing that to this scripture, I want to spend a little few minutes with you thinking about it in a different way. In the Roman world, people had originally done cremation, but starting about 300 years before Jesus, they started building a stone casket called a sarcophagus. And here's one. Most of them were made in either Athens or Rome because that's where the good marble was. And so this is a cheap one. And usually what they had on these caskets for someone's burial was just scenes of feasting or scenes of plenty. Some very wealthy people, they would actually have a picture of the funeral dinner carved into the casket. And that was so you could see who paid for the funeral dinner. It's part of what was going on there. But a very cheap casket like this would be mass-produced and just have some scenes of plenty. And see, here's a very famous one. This has scenes from Greek mythology. Different parts of the Greek myths where people are feasting and having a good time. And they're all gathered around there. This is a very expensive one, probably a senator's coffin. Here's another one. We got battle scenes. This is, we're not sure what battle it represents, but this is one of the times when the Roman army beat up on the Germans. So the people wearing armor are the Romans, and the people who are just wearing togas, that's the German tribes. That's the sort of thing that they would carve in their the sarcophagus. Here's one. The Romans, it got to be such big business, the funeral industry did, that they mass-produced these sarcophaguses. Here's one for a baby. The face in the middle was never finished. It was meant for the local sculptor to carve the particular child's face into it. But they mass-produced them and they left the face a blank, and then when you hired a sculptor, they would finish out the casket. But as you can see, it's got pretty girls and food and plenty of feasting. And then you know that they would, in Rome, there are caves where the Romans would put the sarcophagus after the funeral banquet. And, but things change all of a sudden in about 80 AD. This is a mosaic floor from a synagogue on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. It became a Christian church. And look at that mosaic. What do you see in that picture? You see bread and fish? You see the way that the Romans made bread is they made it round, kind of a little hamburger bun, and then they'd take a knife before they put it in the oven and make either a cross or an 8-fold mark on it. That way you could break the bread and break it into even pieces. So when you see that, it looks like a little wheel. It's actually a loaf of bread. And you can see 4 of them. See that basket looks kind of funny. It's kind of tall. And slender. It's almost like a vase. And it's got these got kind of sloping sides to it. Well, about this time, about 80 AD, is when the art on the caskets starts to change. So this is from Rome. Instead of having Greek mythology, it's got this image of a young person. See, the Roman way of showing youth was to show a guy with no beard. So there's a young man in the middle. You see that he's got one hand. His right hand is on bread, and then his left hand it's kind of worn away. But you see what he's got there? It's fish. See, Christianity was illegal, and they had riots where they burned all the homes of Christians, and Nero blamed the Great Fire of Rome. He blamed that on the Christians. Christianity was illegal, and you could be put to death if you refused to worship the emperor. But somebody had the money. They paid to have this on their casket. A man in the middle with his hand on the fish and his hand on the loaves. And then, through the next decades, in the catacombs, these caves under Rome, you see more and more of these. Because you see Christianity is starting to spread. See, here's a different one. It's that same gesture. Right hand on the bread, left hand on some fishes. And there's another one. There's a cheaper one. The working class people couldn't afford that kind of an amateur engraver. Still that same shape. These are so worn. They probably weren't carved that well originally, but there's 6 baskets down on the ground. They look almost like ice cream cones to me. But you can see that same shape, and it's kind of hard to see the fish. But that's Jesus blessing the loaves and fishes. And see, when these caskets were laying in these caves below Rome, pagans would walk by, but they wouldn't think anything of it because everybody had feasts carved on the side of their sarcophagus. The Christians had a secret message. And the message that they chose again and again and again, probably 90% of them are Jesus feeding the 5,000. Not the Lord's Supper. Occasionally you'll see Daniel in the lion's den. But the picture that the early church went for was this feeding of 5,000. There's a much more expensive one. And this has got several of Jesus' stories together. See that woman on the far right? She's creeping through the crowd. She's going to grab a hold of Jesus, the hem of Jesus' garment. That doesn't belong in the 14th chapter of Matthew, but the sculptor just worked it in. And so you've got to wonder, was the sculptor a Christian? Or did his employer say, oh, when you carve my uncle's casket, make sure you got a hole down at the bottom that's kind of edging her way. But you can see, again, there's a young man with no beard in the center, and he's got his hands up here. That's a Roman symbol of blessing and prayer. And you can see there's loaves down here. There's a little boy just to the left of that figure. Makes me think about the little boy with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But what are they among so many? So here's a picture of the catacombs. So when a Roman person died, they would put them in the sarcophagus. They'd have a funeral procession. And then they would have a feast, often down in the caves where they were putting the body. So when the early church met, there weren't any churches because it was illegal to be Christian. So they would meet in the catacombs. And if they were carrying bread and a cup down there, their pagan neighbors wouldn't think anything of it. Right? And so if another group walked in on them and people were down there breaking bread and sharing a cup, they wouldn't think anything of it. So this is why the early church met in these caves around all of these graves, because they could have church there without being caught. They could blend in with the pagan culture. But you look at the graffiti in the caves. And there, of course, there's the famous one, that fish in Greek that says ichthus. That's the word fish in Greek, but the letters are the first letters in the word Son of Jesus Christ, of God the Son, Savior. That's what ichthus is. So that was a symbol from the early church. And then there's some more graffiti. Somebody just carved while they were waiting for a funeral to take place. They were just scratching into the marble. And look what they carved. They carved an alpha and the Cairo symbol, because the cross would have been obvious what that was. And then, well, it looks like a basket. That same shape that we saw in those early caskets. So even when they weren't talking about the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, even when they weren't talking about feeding the 5,000, this is one of the symbols for Christian faith, was a basket. And then there's a dove, and I think 40 days scratched off for the flood. Look at this art. We talked about the little wheel shape as a loaf of bread. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They didn't have time, or there wasn't the right place for them to make a point that they were Christians. But you know that somebody's standing in there in the middle of a funeral procession while the officials were talking and the local pagan priests were doing their part. Some Christian was standing there counting off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loaves. Now let's see if I can scratch 2 fish into the wall. And then here's a painting. This is from later, but they've still got that motif of loaves and fishes. It's interesting because we tend to look at this story and say, oh, well, this is a nice church story about stewardship. But for the early church, something changed. Actually, for the classical world, something changed. There is a famous writer who talks about classical literature. And one of the things he says is, this was the most skeptical time, about the 200 years before Jesus was the most skeptical time in the ancient world. People didn't believe in the supernatural. They thought the Greek myths and the Roman myths were just a joke. Most people didn't actually follow those religions. It was just the official religion of the government. But people didn't believe in the supernatural. They just weren't very superstitious. You can see that when Jesus walks on the water, the disciples assume it's a ghost. They don't assume it's a miracle from God. They just assume it's a ghost. And one of the things that this authority has said is, this is perhaps the most skeptical period in ancient history. Roman writers manifest an awareness of the miracle stories. So if you divide up the first 100 people who claimed that they were the Messiah, all of them before Jesus, none of them have a miracle. Every one of them after Jesus had some kind of a miracle that they could claim to. But none of them claimed to feed 5,000, to feed anybody. It's kind of interesting. The ancient world started believing in the possibility of miracles and in the supernatural after Jesus. They were mostly skeptical before Jesus, and they quit being skeptical after Jesus. The reason I'm spending time on this is to just say to you that the whole of the ancient world, from Spain over towards the edge of India, changed in 100 years. Their view of the world, their view of their place in the world, and their view of a loving God in charge of everything changed. And the symbol for that change was 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So is this just a story? Is this just one of those church stories that we tell? And we tell our children during children's church, and we expect them to get the point about stewardship? I'm telling you, I personally am a big fan of science. I was originally a physics major, and I believe in the scientific method. My kids have to listen to CDs singing about the glories of the scientific method and how to reject the null hypothesis and all the rest of it. But there was a moment in human history when everything changed. And that moment has a name, and that name was Jesus. And I believe that something happened historically, and that something was that Jesus fed 5,000 people with a couple of loaves and some fishes. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. I believe that. And if you don't, that's okay. I'm not telling you what you have to believe. I'm just telling you why I'm so right. Okay? If you have trouble believing 5 loaves and 2 fishes feeding 5,000 people, if that's a problem for you, that's okay. Here's some homework. Here's some homework. If this is hard, or if you have trouble believing this, how do you do with a man risen from the grave on the third day? How do you deal with a man? Because I will tell you from my knowledge of archaeology and having done archaeology in Israel, the Romans were experts at torture. Okay? The Nazis had nothing on the Romans. The Nazis only had 12 years in power. The Romans had 1,000 years to learn how the human body worked. Most of what we know about nerve endings from before 1900 comes from Romans and their surgeons who were experts at dealing in pain. And they basically tore Jesus' body to death in public so that no one could claim that he was still alive. The Romans did that, and they did it in an official capacity to make sure no one would claim that Jesus rose from the dead. So, if 5 loaves and 2 fishes feeding an army of poor people, if that's too hard to believe, wonder what we do with the idea that Jesus rose from the dead. Not simply that he was raised, but that he rose. Something for you to think about. What do you believe? In the final analysis, it doesn't really matter if I understand this or not. I'm not saved by my understanding. I'm saved by faith in Jesus Christ. And that's what makes the difference. But I see things like this. Those of you who are in Bible study with me on Wednesday nights know that Pastor Joe loves archaeology and loves ancient manuscripts and loves history. The only reason I love the history of the manuscripts is because I can see echoes of what my Lord and Savior did even 2,000 years ago. That he fed upwards of 30,000 people. And the only reason I can explain to you why the whole of the ancient world changed in 100 years' time is because there were 30,000 witnesses. And that they moved to Spain, and they moved to India, and they moved to Armenia and Ethiopia, and they spread the word of Jesus Christ. And it was them doing it, not the celebrities. If you read through those ancient manuscripts I was talking about, they complain that this wonder worker Jesus didn't show up to the celebrities, didn't show up to the government officials, worked with the poor people. And so some people say, well, that's why there's no written records of this. And of course, there are written records, the 4 Gospels. And every one of them, as different as the 4 Gospels are, they all come together on the